Prostitution wasn't illegal before this landmark decision, but it was heavily restricted. The plaintiffs, all current or former prostitutes, argued that those restrictions made sex work dangerous. In striking down the ban on brothels, the appeals court judges agreed. Sex work done indoors, the ruling says, is clearly safer.
I would like to thank the Ontario Court of Appeal justices for pretty much declaring sex workers persons today.
The appeals court also ruled in effect that prostitution is a legitimate business and sex workers must be allowed to hire staff, bodyguards, even tax accountants. Exploiting prostitutes for money by pimps, for example, remains illegal. So does soliciting sex in public places.
Where the court says that sex workers are worthy of the same constitutional protection as everyone in this room. That's what changed.
The ruling doesn't mean radical change overnight. The judges gave time for the government to appeal and said the overturned laws remain in effect for a year, while Parliament considers how to give today's decision a legal footing. The safety and security of prostitutes now legally outweighs some restrictions on aspects of their work. Canada's Conservative government, though, hasn't supported loosening laws on prostitution in the past and isn't thought likely to do so this time. More legal wrangling could lie ahead. Daniel Lack, Al Jazeera, Toronto.
The legal status of prostitution is different across the world, ranging from completely legal to a crime with stiff sentences. Prostitution is allowed in the Netherlands and brothels are legal in some areas. Registered sex workers must pay income tax and keep up with regular checkups. In neighbouring Germany, almost all forms of prostitution are legal under certain conditions. Berlin's most relaxed, while other cities are stricter. In Sweden, selling sex is not illegal, but buying it is. In the United States, prostitution is illegal. However, brothels are legal in a dozen counties in the state of Nevada. And in Brazil, sex work by adults is a minor violation as opposed to a crime and carries a fine. Operating, buying or otherwise employing prostitutes is illegal. Well, for more on this story, I'm joined from Toronto by Nikki Thomas. She's the Executive Director of the Sex Professionals of Canada, a non-profit organisation that advocates on behalf of sex workers. Thank you very much for joining us, Nikki. So is this a good day for sex workers in Canada?
This is a mixed day for sex workers in Canada. On the one hand, those who work in indoor settings can now do so without fear of prosecution and without fear of having their belongings seized if they are arrested. On the other hand, those who work in outdoor settings are not allowed to publicly communicate for the purposes of solicitation, which means that the most vulnerable sex workers are even more vulnerable today than they were yesterday.
So judging by what you're saying, do you think that this will in some way perhaps go towards removing the taboos that still exist around sex workers, and that one day it will be treated like any other job?
We do hope so, and our position as the organisation, who is a volunteer organisation, I would clarify, that represents sex workers, is that sex work is a legitimate profession. Sex workers in Canada do pay taxes. The Canadian Revenue Agency actually has a specific industry code for escorting, so that's why we are pleased that the legal paradox that has surrounded sex work for the last 26 years has been removed today. But as I mentioned, the most vulnerable are even more vulnerable than they were before.
Where does Canada stand internationally? Do you think it's better or worse, say, compared to places like Berlin and Amsterdam?
It's hard to say, and it's hard to compare because different countries have different cultures regarding how free people are about sex and sexuality. And I'd say that Canada is fairly progressive in a lot of ways, but there is still a lot of anxiety and a lot of discontent with how sex is being regulated in Canada. We had a Prime Minister some years ago who stated very eloquently that the state has absolutely no business in the bedrooms of the nation, and we do hope that that is the prevailing trend in our country.
So what's next for you now?
Well, this will be appealed to the Supreme Court. The Ontario and Canadian governments have already indicated that they intend to appeal, and we expect that the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in all the land, will take this case on and do the hearing sometime within the next year or so, and then we'll issue a judgment perhaps another year after that. Once that has been completed, then Parliament will have to go back to the drawing board and come up with some laws that address the issues and both protect those who are vulnerable while also enabling those who choose to engage in this profession without any fear of violence.
All right, got to leave it there. Nikki Thomas, thank you very much.
Thank you.